The first edition of the AP poll has been released, so let's dive in. Number one on the list is UGA, the two-time defending champions. Really nothing to criticize there. Not only are they deserving for what they have accomplished, and to some extent, I feel like, and maybe this is, a carryover from me being a kid watching wrestling, but they've got the belt. Someone's got to beat them. But they've got a lot coming back anyway. Yes, they lose quarterback Stetson Bennett, but they were never quarterback driven anyway. They have a legitimate chance to three-peat. They deserve to be number one. Number two on the list, the Michigan Wolverines, kind of a similar story. They've been the next best program. They've been to back-to-back playoffs. They beat Ohio State twice, so they deserve to be ahead of Ohio State. And then you have the Buckeyes at number three. They push Georgia to the brink, and yes, they lose C.J. Stroud, but Ryan Day is a great quarterbacks coach. They just produce. Think about like Josh Fields. They're always producing quarterbacks at Ohio State. They have a long lineage of great quarterbacks. They've got Kyle McCord ready to take over. He was a big-time prospect. Obviously you'd rather have Stroud and know what you're getting, but I think you've got to feel pretty good about the uber talented Ohio State Buckeyes. Then we get to Alabama. I'm gonna pick up speed a little bit when we get a little further down the list, but I want to dive in, especially on this section, especially for Clemson fans here, because this is kind of the group where I think about 4 through maybe 10, you could really make a lot of arguments any which way. I think 1 and 2, and even 3, I would say, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, very deserving, really should, you got to have that 1, 2, 3. I think anything else would be wrong. But the 4 through 10 here, I think, is really up for debate. Alabama is interesting. They had 2 losses. They lost to LSU and Tennessee. They're ranked above both of them now. New season, yes, but they also lost 2 players in the first 3 picks of the NFL draft, with their quarterback and then Will Anderson, the linebacker, going 3rd overall. So that's a lot to replace. They got Tyler Buckner coming in as a transfer from Notre Dame. He didn't look great at Notre Dame. Doesn't mean he won't look better with elite talent around him. But it seems like there's some reason to think they could be worse. Now, what I think voters are doing here is they're seeing that they get Texas, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and LSU all at home. So they could definitely run the table and then play Georgia in what's essentially a seeding game for the SEC championship. And that's fine. I think Alabama's a great playoff pick, but this is supposed to be a power ranking. It's not like a playoff prediction poll. So I'd have Alabama lower. And I might have LSU above them. LSU beat them last year, and they're bringing their quarterback, Jaden Daniels, back. Jaden Daniels is an elite scrambler. Now, they have the opposite issue where they have to play Florida State in Orlando, and they have to play Alabama in Tuscaloosa. So if you're trying to pick who's going to make the playoffs, you kind of ding them a little bit because of their schedule, not how good they are. I'd have LSU above Alabama. A little bit on that same principle of Georgia. LSU, they not only do they bring more back, but they beat them last year. I don't like putting them below Alabama because they have to go to Alabama. That's kind of like predicting how the season will play out, which I don't think is what you should do in a poll like this. Number 6, and this is where it starts getting even more interesting for Clemson fans, Southern Cal. So Southern Cal, obviously they have Caleb Williams. Their defense should be better. They brought in a lot of transfers to fix that. It's year 2 of Coach Riley. So I think this is totally reasonable. But the Pac-12, and yes, the Pac-12 is falling apart. The bottom of the Pac-12 with Cal and some of these other teams is terrible. But the top of the Pac-12 is really good. It really could stack up to the top of, maybe not the Big Ten, but pretty darn clear near any other conference. You got with Southern Cal, obviously, then Oregon, Utah, and Washington, of course. Sorry. So that's a really, really good kind of foursome there of really strong teams, and they've got to go through, all of them, obviously not themselves, but all the others. And then if they do that, they have to play a championship game. I don't know that they get out of that without 2 losses. Again, same principle. Are they one of the 6 best teams? Maybe, but I don't think they'll make the playoffs. So they're not going to be my playoff pick. But I think this is a reasonable spot for them. Penn State, again, similar situation. They're a good team. But it's tough to figure out how good Penn State is because it's like they play 2 games every year. They lose to Michigan and Ohio State. They can run the table the rest of the way and you still don't really know how good they are. They've got Iowa, and they go to Maryland. Is there kind of their other tough games? But if they win those and go 10-2 with losses to the two best teams, I don't know what to think of them. Okay, let's dive in here. Florida State 8, Clemson 9. ACC media put Clemson as the favorite above Florida State. Seemed like that kind of like ended the Florida State's better than Clemson hype, and then here we are. The AP flips them right back. Penn State, the favorite, or at least I shouldn't say the favorite because, again, it's like a power ranking, but they're putting Florida State above Clemson, the defending ACC champions. I think Florida State's got a great team, especially that offense, man. Jordan Travis is electric. He's a great runner and a great passer, and then they beefed up their the weapons around to bring in Keon Coleman from Michigan State as a big time transfer ad. They've got a lot of talent on that offense. I just don't know how good that defense is. It's not bad. I don't think there's a risk of it being bad, but they gave up some points there towards the end of the season against Florida, against Oklahoma, and you look at they finished on that 6-game win streak. But how impressive was it? They beat Georgia Tech, Miami, Syracuse, Louisiana, not LSU, Louisiana, Florida, and a 6-7 Oklahoma team in their bowl. I don't know that you know that much from that. Maybe Louisville early in the year is one of their best wins. They lost to NC State, Clemson, and Wake Forest. Wake ended up not being good, but I just don't know who they beat. Aside, of course, from LSU in the opener, but that's the opener. Brian Kelly's first game. I just didn't feel like neither team looked that great in that opener. So I still have some questions about Florida State. Would I be surprised if they made the playoff? Absolutely not. Would I be surprised if they were 9-3? No, I think it's also very reasonable. I think this is about right, but I'd have them below Clemson because they haven't beat Clemson since 2014. Clemson brings a lot back too. So Clemson's at number 9, and I think that's a fair number for them, but I'd have them above Florida State. I'd probably have them above Penn State too. I guess the question is, given how bad they finished the year, the passing game evaporated. They lost 2 out of their last 3. Their other loss was it was in November to Notre Dame, so they closed the year really bad. But the problem seemed like it was quarterback, offensive coordinator, and sort of playing off each other, a vicious cycle. The quarterback wasn't making any plays, so the offense became more and more restrictive and turtled. So then the defenses honed in on the running game, and things quickly fell apart from there. You got a new quarterback and you got a new offensive coordinator in Garrett Riley. So do you believe in that? I think I do. Or I certainly do. It looks like the voters maybe do to some extent, but not enough to put them above Florida State. So I think that's really interesting. If the perception is that they're a one-loss, I guess the concern here is if Southern Cal is a one-loss conference champion, Clemson is a one-loss conference champion, who's going to end up getting in? And that's where this starts to matter a little bit. I think Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State all very well could be in the playoff. I think Georgia could run the table. Their schedule's really easy. Michigan has essentially a 2-game schedule with Penn State, Ohio State. In Ohio State, they play Notre Dame, but beyond that, they could get in with 1 loss, not win the East, but same as last year, get in. So if it comes down to it, maybe the Pac-12 champion with 1 loss or the ACC champion, whether that's Florida State or Clemson with 1 loss. Doesn't matter yet, but that's the thing to keep an eye on. I'm going to go fast through the rest of these. Washington, they've got a really tough schedule. They have to go to Michigan State, to Southern Cal, and to Oregon State. Plus, they get Oregon and Utah home. So I don't think they're a playoff team, but they very much deserve to be that spot at 10. Michael Penix threw for 4,641 yards and comes back. Great quarterback, very overlooked. Texas had 5 losses last year. They lost to Bama by 1, Texas Tech by 3 in OT, Oklahoma State by a touchdown, TCU by a touchdown, and Washington in their bowl game by a touchdown. Good to see that they're actually behind Washington and didn't get so hyped that they jumped them for no reason. But, they get Quinn Ewers back. He missed time. He probably would have beat Alabama if he hadn't got hurt in that game, but it's just a lot of losses. I just don't buy the hype. I never buy the Texas hype. I never buy the Miami hype. So yeah, I'd have Texas a few spots lower. I don't think it's, crazy that they're 12. They've got a good team coming back. They're the favorites in their conferences. They should be, but I'm just not buying it. Tennessee is a team I'd have higher. At number 12, it's reasonable, but they lost to Georgia, which hardly counts. They lost one other game to South Carolina when their quarterback Hendon Hooker hurt his knee. Now, that's not why they lost necessarily. They're already down, but even without him, Joe Milton won the Orange Bowl against Clemson, who was ranked above Tennessee. So it feels weird that Tennessee's this low. I think it feels like there's a lot of kind of brand bias in this case in favor of Alabama, who lost to Tennessee last year and brings back, loses a lot too. Maybe you can argue more than Tennessee. Whereas, Tennessee has improvement year in and year out like Alabama has. But I'd have Tennessee several spots higher. I might have them above Clemson, even though I'd hold Clemson at 9 and maybe flip, Penn State and Florida State behind them and Tennessee and maybe even Washington above Clemson. So I think Clemson's right at 9, but Penn State and Florida State above Clemson feels weird. I'll pick up the pace here. Notre Dame, they beat Clemson. They beat UNC too. And they beat South Carolina, who obviously beat Clemson, but lost to Marshall, lost to Stanford. And I just wonder if that is the win over Notre Dame a commentary on Notre Dame, or is the commentary on that game being played in heavy wind with a quarterback who played awful the week before and looked completely out of sorts, kind of maybe was in his own head, and a coaching staff that for some reason wasn't willing to pull the trigger on that quarterback change until it was too late and put Klubnik in an impossible situation. I don't know. I think that was more of a Clemson thing than a Notre Dame thing, and it's not to take anything away from them, but I think 13 is about right, maybe a spot or two lower, but I wouldn't have them any higher than this. Utah does what they need to do to not make the playoff and make sure no one else in their conference makes the playoff. I think they'll do that again this year. The Ducks at 15 seems good. They got Bo Nix back. I think they'll be tough, but kind of the same story. That kind of forced them at the top of the Pac-12. I think it's going to eat each other up. Kansas State, don't forget, they're the defending Big 12 champs. They may not be as talented as Texas and some of these others, but they run a good program. Let's not forget about them. TCU, obviously, they played for the national championship. It wasn't close, but nonetheless, heck of a season. They had 8 players drafted, and they lost their offensive coordinator, Garrett Riley, to Clemson. It's a ton to replace. Star wide receiver, Quentin Johnson, star running back, Kendre Miller, and, of course, Heisman finalist quarterback, Max Duggan, all gone. It's going to be tough to replace. I think they'll be decent, but 17 kind of range decent. So this is about right. And then Oregon State will, they're going to have good defense. They're kind of just outside of that top 4 kind of group of the Pac-12, even though they beat Oregon. This feels about right. I don't know how much you trust DJ Uiagalelei. I've heard mixed things about him in camp. If he's good, they could exceed this. If he's bad, I don't know that they'll drop a ton. I think they might just play a different quarterback because they do have some depth there. Wisconsin at 19, I think they're just going to enjoy this last year of playing in the West before they share not a division, but a conference that plays them all equally, and they're playing Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Southern Cal. Probably not the same here, but a lot more regularly than they do now. It's going to get a lot tougher for Wisconsin. North Carolina, I think the 21 ranking's fine, but I don't believe in them. Drake May is awesome, and I don't know who else is. I think Mac Brown's a little bit overrated because he's kind of a goofy guy that people like for some reason. They think it's cool that he has an agent pick out Air Jordans from to wear. I'm not enamored by it. I think this could be a swan song. I think NC State's better than North Carolina, perhaps by a few games. Ole Miss, they were the flavor of the day for a while, ranked really, really high, and then lost 4 or 5 to end the year. A&M, always talented, but not often very good, and they're probably the 5th best team in the SEC if they're lucky. That A&M versus Miami game feels like, the Spider-Man meme where two programs are the same thing. Like, we're talented, but we're not good. So that'll be a fun one to watch. And then Tulane is the group of 5 team that gets in. They beat Southern Cal in the Cotton Bowl. And then Iowa, who's actually very interesting, rounds out our top 25. Iowa, of course, elite defense, horrific offense. If their offense could be average, they could be a real contender. They could be really exceeded top 25 or the 25th ranking. They have their coach's son as the offensive coordinator. They finally have a real quarterback in Cade McNamara. So we're going to see, is it the quarterback or was it actually Brian Ferentz, the offensive coordinator? And if that's the case, if they're not scoring significantly more than they were last year, he'll be gone based on the contract. If not, it's just some sort of crazy nepotism. But Iowa's a program I'd like to see them be more balanced. It's just it's got to be painful to have such a good defense wasted. Really that was Clemson, not last year, but in 2021. So we'll see if Iowa could fix their offense. If they could just be semi-competent, then they can make some waves. So that's the top 25. I think Clemson's ranked about right. 9, I'd have them at 9, but I might have Tennessee, Washington over them, not Penn State, Florida State. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, if I could ask you, please give a subscribe. If you are already a subscriber, I thank you for that. Thank you so much. Just like this video. It really helps out.